What's up? Today we've got the top 5 most shocking chess openings that are surprisingly successful. And let's get right into it. So, if I asked you what is the worst move for white in the starting position, what would you say? Perhaps the strong candidate is a move pawn g4. It doesn't develop anything, weakens the king side, and pawns don't go back, so looks like a really bad move. But I've actually noticed some time ago that some blitz hustlers are playing this Grob opening actively with good results. So I decided to figure out what's going on here, and the point is black usually responds with pawn d5, trying to attack this pawn over here, and you keep playing seemingly dumb, bishop g2, just blundering this pawn away. After black happily captures the pawn, you then play pawn to c4. Now all of a sudden black starts feeling a bit uncomfortable, because so far they thought that you're just a very beginner player and you're playing dumb moves. But now after pawn c4, it turns out that you're putting strong pressure on this diagonal. Right now this pawn under the attack. If black decides to capture over here, then you're gonna happily grab this pawn on b7, and on the next move you're gonna win the rook because it has no way to retreat or escape from this attack. So that is clearly advantageous for white. And figuring out this, black decides, okay, let me just shut down this bishop on g2 completely. Let's play pawn c6, and now I've got this strong pawn barrier in the middle of the board so that I don't have to worry about this bishop anymore. What you do then is you just trade on d5, and then you follow up with queen to b3, which once again double attack blacks along this diagonal, because your bishop from g2 still puts strong pressure, helping you to attack all around. And once again black is challenged. They thought that they're gonna have an easy life and a great advantage, but now they're challenged. They don't know how to protect both pawns, and once again their intuitive decision, which is the most played move in this position, is to play the move pawn e6, still trying to put up this barrier on the way of your bishop and saying, hey, let me shut this down completely. But as soon as they play pawn e6, you happily play queen a4, and it turns out that this is a double attack to the bishop and the king, and therefore you are just winning the game. Very simple. And again, this is the most played moves by black, therefore that's how the game is most likely to occur when you try out this Grob opening. So you may actually consider trying this out. I've got another dedicated video actually about the Grob's opening. It's much stronger than it seems at first. Of course, I would not recommend that you play it in serious tournament against an experienced opponent, but for an internet blitz game, this can be a perfect opening tool for you. Going next to the number 4 in our ranking is the opening for black. So if white plays pawn e4, let me ask you the same obscure question. What is the weakest move for black? Like, how would you play if you want to lose the game as quickly as possible? That would probably be the move pawn f5, because you're giving up the pawn. In addition to that, you're weakening this diagonal, which is the shortest path for white to possibly checkmate you. And as if that is not enough, on the next move we're gonna play king f7, developing our king instead of developing any other piece, contrary to everything that we know about chess. And you may be surprised to know that this is actually a chess opening called Duras Gambit, and it's a lot trickier than it seems at first. Anyway, I'm gonna show you something really exciting in a moment, but let's first see what's going on right here. So white obviously wants to attack black's exposed king, so they play queen h5. Looks like white is about to, finish the game off within just a couple moves. Black plays pawn g6. White captures the pawn, noticing that in case you recapture, white is gonna win this rook on h8. So white feels like white's almost winning here. Black plays king g7. White captures the other pawn, completely destroying the pawn shield around the king. We recapture, white gives check, and king hides here to h8. It's a pretty cool and sneaky maneuver how your king somehow sneaked into the corner of the board without really castling, but now the king is quite in safety. Alright, what's gonna white do here? Well, before going into the variations, let me show you something really funny here. So here we move to the database of online blitz games, and now let's take a look at a couple really funny things here. First of all, I've just turned on the engine, Stockfish, and it gives us the evaluation of plus 5.9, meaning almost plus 6. And the Stockfish tells you like, come on dude, you're crazy, white is winning here, like what's going on? But if we look down here to the right corner where we can see the statistics of games played, and for each move we have the success rate here. With this white part of the chart is the success rate for white, and the right side, the success rate for black. And if you look at this, it's surprisingly bad for white, because assuming the evaluation of +6, you think that white should be winning all the games here, but the reality is completely the opposite. Look at this. Here white scored 53%, roughly, half of the games, which is just normal. And here they even scored below 50%, 42%, 46, 47, 49. So that's crazy, because the white's actual results in this opening are worse compared to most of the classical openings out there. Alright, let's take a look into details and see how you can actually win here as black. White often goes bishop d3, I think it's one of the most played moves, trying to hit the rook and continue chasing your king. But instead of moving the rook, we toss in a powerful in-between move, bishop h6. We say, hey, you're attacking our rook, but we're attacking your queen. And white delivers check here on e5, and now we cover with the rook, but thanks to this in-between move, we regrouped our pieces, and now we have our bishop on active position, and our rook is in the open file as well. Pretty cool. Now, here white sees that there is no way for them to attack your king anymore, so they just play a normal development move, knight f3. Then you respond with knight to c6, attacking the queen over here. The queen needs to move, and white figures out that if the queen goes away somewhere and removes this pin, then your rook will be free to possibly capture that pawn on g2. White is obviously annoyed by that, so they play queen c3, trying to maintain the pin along this diagonal. And believe it or not, at this point, black is already having an advantage, and very often black wins the game very, very quickly, because the white's position is quite critical right now, which is absolutely crazy, because just a few moves were played in seemingly the worst opening of all. Black goes pawn e5, and that's the beginning of the end for white. Finally enough. So what this move does is a couple things. Well, first of all, we block this pin, and white cannot win this pawn, because if they try, there is simply queen e7, and thanks to the pin, we're going to capture the knight on the next move, because we're attacking it twice, so we're going to win the piece. So that's one of the ways for white to lose the game easily. If not, if they don't take on e5, then what? Well, then they realize that the pawn on g2 is under the attack, so they just castle. And after they castle, you play another strong move, pawn d5. Now you're gaining the space control in the center of the board. You're also threatening mainly pawn e4, which will double attack the minor pieces. Of course, you may also potentially push the other pawn, but pushing this pawn seems just a lot stronger. Also, you're opening up the diagonal for this bishop so that it can go to h3, and together with the rook, it can start creating massive attack on the king side. And all in all, you're just winning here. So if white takes on e5, and if not, it's hard to see what else white can do, then you play pawn d4, breaking the connection between the queen and the knight so that you want to just win the knight on the next move. And things are really bad for white at this point. They realize that they may lose the knight, and here they start calculating lines, and they find that they've got a counter blow. Knight takes c6. They think, oh, I'm still winning. If he takes here, I'm going to take here. So that's what white calculates, thinking that they're still winning. But you play queen d5, and all of a sudden, it's time for white to resign. You attack here on g2, aiming to just queen takes g2 on the next move and win the game. But in addition to that, you're threatening the queen. Of course, you're still threatening the knight. You're threatening all around, and it's game over. Quite funny how the worst opening of all turns out to be such a big success for black. The next opening gambit we're about to see is my personal favorite. I'm having a lot of fun with it lately, but before diving into it, let me make a quick announcement that if you ever wanted to know how some chess players progress much faster than all the other players, then I'm happy to invite you to our next cohort of students joining the course The Secrets of Strong Players, where I break it down the 8 main differences of strong players compared to the rest, and how I managed to become an international master at the age of 13 and a grandmaster later, and how many of my students could get some quick successes in chess. So if you're interested, click the link below and join us right now. You'll get the 50% discount, 2 extra courses as a free bonus, and of course access to our insider community where you can ask questions to me, to other students, and collaborate and make sure you're getting the best out of it. So it's only good for a couple days, and if you're interested, don't miss out. And the next opening we're about to explore, number 3 in our ranking, is the Rousseau Gambit. After white plays all the first casual moves, all of a sudden you play pawn f5. somewhat similar to the King's Gambit played as black, or the Vienna Gambit played with black pieces, and at first it seems extremely risky. Weakening this diagonal, weakening possibly with this diagonal, and of course giving up this pawn because white can just grab it. So it looks like an absolutely crazy move for black to play, but it turns out to be extremely successful, and it's actually a hidden weapon that you are welcome to use, because so far not many players are aware of it, and you can get just great results with it. Now, most of your opponents will obviously capture here this pawn, because if not, then you will capture there yourself. So they're probably going to capture here. And it turns out that this extra tempo that white has, compared to, playing the King's Gambit as white, is not that advantageous, because now you can start pushing central pawns, pawn e4 attacking that knight, and pawn d5 attacking that bishop, and all of a sudden, this extra tempo that white used to develop their minor pieces kind of backfires, because now you start attacking all these pieces, gaining extra tempos and pushing them back. So right now you play pawn e4. And at this point, what is white going to do here? Well, your opponent will figure out that the knight has been attacked. Okay, where should the knight go? Normally it would wish to go somewhere to the center of the board, but these squares are controlled by your knight. Okay, and if the knight wants to go to the side, then it's controlled by the queen. So at this point your opponent realizes that he or she is in trouble, and the most natural reaction for your opponent would be to say a curse word and to play knight to g1, sadly, undeveloping the knight back to its original square. Now, there's a little detail here that black needs to be aware of. Normally, you wish to play pawn d5, but as soon as the white move their knight away, they possibly are ready to play queen h5, delivering this threat to your king. But there is a simple way to cover that. You just play knight f6 first, and you play d5 on the next move. This little delay doesn't change anything. Let's say white goes knight c3, and it's one of the common ways for white to play. You push the pawn forward, d5, attacking the bishop. It goes to b5, then you keep pushing pawn d4, gaining the other tempo, attacking the other knight of white. It goes back to e2, and now there are a number of ways for black. The move that I like is queen d5, kind of solidifying the black's position, putting things together. From here, the queen defends these two pawns, also puts pressure onto this bishop on b5, and then you're ready to take back your pawn on f5, and you're just completely dominating here. Here's what's going to happen, because it's also a lot of fun. White takes here, recapture by the pawn, because your queen is in the middle of the board, it's very strong, we don't want to move it away. Then white needs to develop somehow, right? So they play pawn d3, trying to get some breathing room for their pieces. And this is a very, it's a mistake, but it's hard to notice, because then you play, suddenly, bishop b4 check. Your opponent thinks, okay, just bishop d2. And at this point, your opponent starts thinking that their position isn't all that bad, You're going to capture here, they recapture, and slowly their pieces start to get out. But instead of all that, you play move, no, not a5. a5 is a loser's move. Pawn e3, that's what we want to play. And this is an absolute bane here, because pawn e3 attacks the bishop, attacks this pawn. Even more so, it opens up the queen to capture that pawn on g2 and then to just destroy everything on the white's king side. And black is winning in a very beautiful manner. So if white captures here on b4, and by the way, they cannot capture this pawn twice with their pawn and bishop, because the bishop is pinned by your bishop, right? So they have to capture here on b4, then queen takes g2, and even though you're threatening to win the rook, there is even a stronger threat. Simply queen takes f2 checkmate, and there is no normal way for white to stop that. So it's crazy how you crush white in just a couple moves in an opening which initially seemed completely anti-positional and just wrong. But again, that's what I said earlier, it's one of my most favorite openings right now, because it's just crazily successful in reality. If you're as excited about this opening as I am, I've got another video where I cover it in greater details, and you may check this out later. And now let's move on to the two winners of our list of the most shocking and yet crazily successful openings. Alright, number 2 in our list is the opening which I also love a lot. It works out for white when your opponent plays the Sicilian defense against you, and since Sicilian is one of the top 2 most played openings for black, definitely can work frequently for you. Here after knight f3, knight c6, the classical line. Again, if I were to ask you about the dumbest move here for white in the position, one of the strong candidates would be the move pawn b4. Giving up the pawn on a square that is most controlled by black. Here they have a nice choice of whether to capture it with a pawn or with a knight, and it seems completely meaningless for white to just give up that pawn on the side for no reason whatsoever. But in reality, it's again a lot trickier than that. When black captures it, it doesn't really matter whether they capture with a pawn or knight, it usually goes to the same position anyway. You then play pawn d4. It turns out that we deflected their pawn here from this square c5, and now you manage to obtain these beautiful pawns in the center, and they're ready to be pushed forward and to attack the black's knight. Therefore, black starts becoming worried about that, and they play pawn d5 themselves. Now you take there, queen recaptures, and you play pawn c4. Keep gaining tempos, keep attacking. Now you're attacking the queen here, pretty obviously. If the queen moves away, then your other pawn is ready to be pushed forward to d5 and to start attacking the knight. That doesn't look too appealing for black, therefore they're going to take en passant. Over here, pawn takes, you recapture with the knight, renewing the threat to the queen, so once again they have to move it away. They play queen a5, thinking that they gain tempo attacking your knight over here, but instead of defending the knight, you play another seemingly dumb move, which makes a lot of sense. And in fact, I think that Stockfish even recommends this move, which is rook b1. Again, strange move. You just ignore the fact that black can simply win the knight for nothing, and you put a rook to an open file. You know, it's a nice positional idea to put your rook to an open file, but, you know, without giving up the knight in the meantime. Anyway, we do that. Black captures the knight. We play bishop d2. Now it attacks the queen. The only square for the queen to go is queen to a3. Now you play pawn d5. And, you know, all of a sudden, even though it seems like you were playing give up chess so far, giving up everything that you can, your position isn't as bad as black thought it would be, because now you're attacking this knight, your rook is pretty active along this file, your both bishops are ready to be brought into action very quickly, so all of a sudden you're putting this extremely strong pressure on black, and it's definitely not easy for black to cope with it. In fact, in most of the games they collapse very quickly. They just move their knight away to b8. Now you play another sneaky move, queen c2. I think people just, of course, got this recommendation from a computer, because otherwise it's pretty difficult to notice this. But it has two threats. The obvious threat, queen takes c8, bishop checkmate, and also a hidden threat of bishop coming here to b4, which would all of a sudden trap the queen on a3, because it would have no squares to go to. For example, if black decides to move their knight and develop the bishop that way, then just bishop b4, and indeed the queen is just trapped. So that's one of the nice ways for you to win the game on the spot. If not that, let's say they decide to move their bishop from danger, right? Because again, otherwise you're just going to capture it. Let's say they develop their bishop here. You play another interesting move, bishop b5. And what it does is it renews the threat of bishop b4, you know, trapping the queen. They cannot take here on b5, because then they overlook a nice little checkmate queen c8. Pretty cool. Let's revert that. And what they do in real games is that they think that they solidify their defense by playing knight f6, but it doesn't really change a thing, because you still can deliver this sneaky checkmate, queen c8, checkmate. A really funny line, and again, it's just strangely successful, because you've got this strong, unexpected attack that black is unprepared for, unready to face, and it's, objectively speaking, very difficult for black to find proper defense. And the opening that tops our list of the most shocking openings is the Halloween Gambit, and I think it just makes sense. Here, after knight f3, knight c6, we're playing knight c3, inviting black into the 4 knights game, which they usually play, and then all of a sudden we take this pawn on e5, getting into the Halloween Gambit. Again, it looks like a complete beginner mistake, because black can simply win this knight, and they do. It seems like you just somehow overlooked that black already developed their knight there to c6, and you cannot capture the pawn because, you know, you lose a piece, and they just take it. Of course, why not? It looks like, you know, time for white to resign, but you don't. You play pawn d4, attacking the knight, gaining a tempo. It goes back somewhere, it doesn't really matter, and you just keep pushing the pawns forward, pawn e5, and you just sacrificed a knight for nothing, well, for just a pawn, but that's not enough compensation, and you keep playing as if nothing happened. Now we're attacking the knight. It can go forward, similar to one of the other openings we analyzed previously, where somehow all the squares in front of the knight are already controlled by white. Therefore, the knight has to move backward to g8, and now you play bishop c4, eyeing to this pawn on f7 so that you can put together some attack against it in the future. Now, black needs to develop somehow, right? So they play, let's say, pawn d6. I think it's either the most played move or one of the most played moves here by black. And then you play queen f3, indeed, trying to deliver this kind of a scholar's checkmate, but even though the threat is obvious, it's still pretty inconvenient for black to defend against it. What they usually do is playing bishop a6, which is a wrong move, because now, instead of trading somewhere, you can grab this pawn on b7. And black's already quite in trouble, I would say. Objectively speaking, they can of course defend, but in a real game, that's really difficult. They usually capture here on c4, thinking that you just blunder another piece, but you didn't. You play queen c6 check, and all of a sudden black is in trouble. Check to the king. Now, what do black do? If black covers it by queen d7, they overlook their rook over there, and you can just grab it. Win in the rook, and you're happy. If not, they have to move the king to e7. And now you have a choice, right? If you are a sane person, then of course you just take here, and now you have 2 pawns for a piece, plus black's king is extremely weak. You're ready to play bishop g5, maybe knight d5, or castle quickly and attack along the central files, and you're happy about everything here. But if you are an insane person, then you may play another move, which is obviously something that's going to make your opponent to start sweating, is to move pawn f4. And here, you just sacrifice the second minor piece, and you keep playing as if nothing happened. You're just playing a move that solidifies your center, you know? And it's funny because it's actually a quite strong move as well. And, you know, the point here is that the black's king here is extremely limited. If you look at this, it can't go here, because what? Queen controls that. Can't go here because the pawn controls that. Therefore, it's almost in the cage, and we want to keep it there so that you can possibly checkmate it. And that's why we play this move pawn f4, because we love the situation and we want to keep it. When they play bishop e6, trying to put their bishop to safety, you just start going all the way forward with your attack. Play pawn f5, giving up another pawn, but opening a lot of lines for your minor pieces and for your rook, which can come here in the future. Now they capture it. And now you could castle or do something else, but you can play this nice in between move knight d5 check. Check to the king, it has to go to e6. Now knight takes c7, check to the king once again, and king goes back here to e7. And theoretically you could start collecting the material, take it over there, but you say, hey, I'm not interested, I want to checkmate this dude. And you just castle. And now black is under such a massive fire of all of your pieces combined. Your rook is attacking along this file. Your bishop is ready to be brought here to g5 and attack the king and the queen. And of course, you already have this queen and knight over there, you know, that already attacks the black's king. So it's just crazy, and black cannot cope with that. Let's say they play rook c8 or any other move, it doesn't really matter. You just play bishop g5 and, you know, it's game over. After a couple moves, you just keep destroying black. They can play different moves, but it doesn't change the situation overall. I'm just showing you one of the games here. Rook e1, check to the king. And if it goes somewhere, let's say, you know, king d8 or king f7, there's this queen e8 checkmate. So that's how the game can work out for you if you use this weird, successfully popular for white Halloween gambit. If you know any other surprising openings that you love using, feel free to share them in the comments down below, and who knows, maybe I'll record the next video covering one of your personal favorite openings. Also, if you decided to join the current cohort of students going through the course The Secrets of Strong Players, then I can't wait to serve you there, and either way, wishing you all the best, keep crushing it, talk soon.